Hello, welcome back to my channel, Inflightmuzik. My name is Ian, and today I want to show you the difference between mastering your mix with FL Studio's Soft Clipper versus FL Studio's Maximus. If you're new to the channel and you're looking for FL Studio tips and tricks and general music production advice, definitely do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button with that notification bell, and you'll be notified every time I drop a new video. So some of you will be familiar with this loop that I've made. It's pretty much just a chorus, which is what I recommend whenever you're mastering one of your mixes. Go to the loudest part of your song, loop that, and then start adding your mastering chain and go from there. First, we're just going to start out listening to what we have so far. So you'll already notice that the mix is already pretty clean, and that's really what you want to go for whenever you are trying to balance things out ahead of time before you get into mastering. Now, some people will master with mastering plugins on their main master channel, and that's fine. It just really depends on what type of plugin it is. I wouldn't recommend doing that with FL Studio Limiter, but with Soft Clipper, that's probably fine. With Soft Clipper, that usually works out. With Maximus, it could work out, but I recommend staying away from that technique if you're using Maximus. But let's go ahead and add on Fruity Soft Clipper. And the idea behind this is it's going to keep everything below 0. Just leave the settings as is. And let's just go ahead and listen to what the beat sounds like so far and where our level is at. So you'll notice that not a lot changed. And that's because most of the beat isn't going into or past 0. So what you want to do is go ahead and add another gain staging plugin. A lot of people will tell you to use something like Fruity Balance to get the volume up. I find that Fruity Balance actually doesn't have enough volume to increase within that plugin. One of the other plugins that works a lot better is Fruity Panamatic or Fruity Parametric EQ2. You could just raise the overall volume in here. So we're hitting right about -1. I'm going to go ahead and pull up Ulean loudness meter, just so that we know exactly where our peaks are at for sure. And the number that we're just paying attention to for now is true peak max. So we're about 0.3 dB over -1 true peak max, and for uploading to YouTube and pretty much any streaming platform, they always recommend -1 dB true peak. So we're just going to decrease this parametric EQ by 0.3 dB. So we're at 6.9, so we're going to take it down to 6.6. And this doesn't always translate exactly, so you'll have to still pay attention. And you can see right there, it didn't translate perfectly. So let's go ahead and just decrease it by 0.1, and that should get us. And there we go. So after looking at that number, I usually look at the integrated loudness, and we're at -13. I always aim for anywhere between -11 and -14. Those ranges typically will sound good on the streaming platforms when you're trying to get loudness. Obviously, the closer to -11, the louder it will be, but the closer to -14, the cleaner it will be. Another number that I like to pay attention to is the momentary max. And one of the numbers that I've heard recommended is -9. Just make sure it never goes over -9. I push it towards -8 sometimes, but it's usually between -8 and -9 is where I'm looking for this momentary max to be. There's a link in the description below if you want more details about uploading to streaming platforms. I just posted a video last week about mastering for streaming platforms and some free tools other than Ulean loudness meter that will help you get exactly the sound that you're looking for before you even upload it to those streaming services, because you'll actually be able to listen to what it's going to sound like beforehand. So we're basically done with Soft Clipper. That's exactly how I would master it if this was mastering with Soft Clipper. So let's go ahead and turn these off, and let's switch over to Maximus. So this is my own personal preset. The closest preset that I've found that resembles this, if you go to mastering and go to clear RMS or master aid 1, those are pretty similar to what I have laid out here, but you could go ahead and copy these settings in each of these windows. But these settings will change, of course. But let me go ahead and help you out by starting off with one of these presets and switching things over to the way that I have them. So let's go to Master Aid 1. The first thing that I want you to do is take a look at this drop-down menu, turn on oversample and linear phase filters. I'm not going to get into everything that does, but it's going to make things just a lot cleaner and a lot better when you master. And then turn this input setting on so that we could see the audio going into those tracks. And then switch all these pre-knobs, right click and hit reset. And then when you go to bands, all these bands should be even. If you see that any of these bands are uneven, it's because one of these pre-knobs are driving the signal into the compressor. So we don't want to do that. Let's just have them all even. We're just going to take a listen to what's going on. We're going to turn it on and turn it off. We'll start with it off and then I'll turn it on. And again, you'll see that this signal is really low because I mixed everything nice and low. So we're just going to turn on this parametric EQ2, and then we'll just leave this on when we switch back and forth between Soft Clipper, and we'll just make sure that our levels are exactly the same coming out of each plugin when we compare them. So now we got a nice loud signal. So first thing that I want you to do, go to the low band. I like to make this all the way mono. Right now the low band goes all the way up to 140 hertz or so. Anywhere between 140 and 150 is good. And we're just gonna make all that mono. And now I'm just gonna add a point somewhere between the mid and the top part of the peak. And I'm just gonna decrease this. And we're looking for just a tiny bit of gain reduction. Go into the monitor mode. And you won't have to really worry about these settings right here. I find they work pretty good, but if I do change anything, it's usually the release and the sustain. I'm usually decreasing those to make it react less to the signal. And I might increase the attack a little bit so that more of the punchiness comes out of the low end. But in general, the knobs are usually right around there. As long as you're using your ears, you should be fine. Just make sure you're not clobbering the signal with these peaks. Same thing with the mids. We're going to see where the mids are hitting, and then we're going to add a point and then decrease this. We're just going to decrease the knee just slightly. And then I'm going to spread the mid signal. Now this is something that Soft Clipper can't do. So this is going to enhance the signal, make it sound a little more professional than what Soft Clipper is able to do. Just adding a little bit of space. And then we're going to go into the highs and do the same exact thing. like to spread the highs a little bit more than the mids. Now let's go ahead and take a look at where our true peak is. Just gonna reset this and let's take a listen. So let's decrease this by 0.5. Go into the master, and we're just going to lower the ceiling down by 0.5, and let's take a listen there. Go a little bit lower, 0.2. Like I said, it doesn't translate exactly. True peak is measuring inner sample peaking, so just going down by 0.1 or 0.2 dB according to this number, it's not always going to translate. You got to see what actually happens after the decrease. And to be honest with you, sometimes I'm not really picky about the true peak hitting exactly at -1, as long as it's not higher than -1. So sometimes I'll just leave it at -1.3, -1.2, or 1.1. That 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 difference, you're not going to hear that difference. So as long as you're below -1, you're good. Just try to get as close to -1 as possible. Let's take a look at our integrated loudness and our momentary loudness as well. So our momentary is -7.7 and our integrated is -12.5. I'm not really too concerned about that. I'm more paying attention to the sound. I'm within that range. I'm close enough to -8 to where I'm not going to be too concerned about that momentary max. As long as it's not like -6, -4, -5, you should be good. I'm just trying to get as close to -8, -9 as possible. But if it goes a little bit towards -7.7, that's okay. That 0.3, I'm not too worried about. So let's just go ahead and compare Soft Clipper to Maximus. I'm going to play Soft Clipper first. So to me, by my ears, Maximus is always just cleaner, louder, more spacious. It's just a better master every single time. I've never been able to get Soft Clipper to sound as good as Maximus. Never, ever, ever. The closest that I have been able to is doing a lot more work in the mix. And that's the great thing about Maximus. I mean, I'm trying to keep things really simple for you guys. I do show you guys a lot of mixing tips, and the thing about those tips are, I don't want you guys to be overproducing. Maximus is a way to keep you guys from doing that, just by focusing on the little tricks inside of Maximus that can save you time from having to do the individual things to each track. And that's something that a lot of expert engineers will tell you. Like I said at the beginning of the video about adding plugins to your mastering chain, there's plenty of engineers that will do this to their buses as well. And they do that so that they're not overproducing each individual track. They like to try to hear what the compression is going to sound like, they try to get compression, EQ kind of set up on the overall sound before going into making little changes that actually don't end up mattering as much in the mix compared to the dramatic changes that you can do on the buses to really clean things up in an instant. And that's really the same concept that I'm seeing with using Maximus versus Soft Clipper, because Maximus is just capable of doing a lot more to make your master sound a lot more tighter, a lot more finished, a lot more polished. With Soft Clipper, you don't have any options, and all it's doing is just saturating the top. And within Maximus, you could see that there's multiple saturation options. You could just saturate the low end, the mids, the highs. You could saturate the entire master. And it has multiple saturating algorithms. So if you go to the left, it's saturation mode A. If you go to the right, it's saturation mode B, where you could just saturate the peaks of certain sounds. Mode A is saturating the entire signal. and then you just adjust this knob for the flavor of that saturation. And right now I have, with this preset, all of these are totally saturated. So one thing that I recommend, play around with your sound where it's not going to be wrong. That's the great thing about Maximus right here with the saturation settings. You're not going to really hurt the mix too much by messing around with the saturation knob. You're just changing the color, the feel, the vibe. That lets you have more fun with what you're doing. So yeah, upgrade your masters to using Maximus. It's not a difficult plugin. There are more controls than what I went over, but if you just pay attention to the things that I showed you, that's a good starting point to just go in and make your masters better than just using Soft Clipper, and definitely better than just using Fruity Limiter. Again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.